Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guests today are my two dear friends, Scott Ritter and Diane Sare, and they're going to talk about their respective um, initiatives this weekend towards peace. So, Scott, before we start, I've got to ask you a question. It seems as though, even though the mainstream media is not reporting it, are we in a hot war with Russia right now?
Yeah, American missiles provided by the United States for the express purpose of striking Russia, um, being directed to their targets based upon intelligence that can only be provided by the United States intelligence targeting data that is transferred to these missiles by American hands, um, are striking Russian soil, killing Russian soldiers. If an analogous situation took place on the U.S. southern border with Mexico, where Russian or Chinese missiles were provided to Mexican cartels targeted by Russia or China using intelligence data that can only be brought together by Russian and Chinese intelligence capabilities, fired into American soil and killing American soldiers. You can be damn certain the United States Congress would call that an act of war and would be seeking to declare war. Um, so the United States is in an active war with Russia. Um, and even though we haven't done a declaration of war, we haven't even gotten notification from the President of the United States to Congress about this. As we speak, American citizens should understand that we are legally in a state of armed conflict with Russia.
That's frightening. That's really frightening. So, Scott, why don't you start? What will you be doing this weekend?
Trying to stop a nuclear war because this what we just talked about is the United States attacking Russia is an issue that the Russians take extremely seriously, and they've began coordinating a response, through different escalatory measures and interventions to try and educate the United States on the consequences of continuing this course of action. And the ultimate consequence is that Russia will, according to its newly promulgated nuclear doctrine, be compelled to respond with nuclear weapons. And then it's game, set, match, the world ends. Um, so, you're going to try and educate people about the reality of this situation. And we're going to try to talk about solutions. I was always told, I mean, I remember as a lieutenant, my battalion commander was always in the Marines. He's like, he encouraged us to speak up. But he said, if you stand up at my desk and you tell me there's a problem, you better damn well have a solution to that problem in mind or keep your mouth shut. And that's how I've been operating my entire life. You can't just sit there and go, hey, got a problem, got a problem. And the other problem is you can't solve a problem unless you've adequately defined it, accurately defined the problem. So, there's a lot of people out there talking about the dangers of nuclear war, and they're right. But I think that I have brought it down to its ultimate essence. We can stop the immediate risk of nuclear war. And this is the good news. If you notice, there's a smile on my face for the first time in a long time, because until recently, every time I ran the numbers, I couldn't sleep at night because it always ended up in nuclear war. I was as depressed as you could possibly get, and I was just scared because I'm just looking at it saying this is going to happen. There's nothing we can do to stop it. Um, After yesterday's meetings in Congress with different representatives and their staffs, I walked away confident that they understand the danger and they understand the solution. And the solution is actually the simplest thing in the world. Stop attacking Russia with ATACMS missiles. There it is. We just made nuclear war go away. Doesn't mean we've solved any of the problems. The problems still exist. And there will be a lot of work left to be done to resolve these issues. Um, but that work won't necessarily lead us to a nuclear confrontation. The thing that's going to lead us to a nuclear confrontation is the continued use by Ukraine of long range strike missiles provided by the United States, Great Britain, and France that use targeting data developed by the United States. This makes the use of these weapons an attack on Russia by the United States, Great Britain, and France, that's a state of war, and Russia views this in existential terms. And there's other things to talk about. How this could be used as a cover for a preemptive strike designed to strategically defeat Russia, in keeping with the policy that's still in place of strategically defeating Russia. And just so everybody understands, when I say strategically defeated Russia, it's not an academic term. Let me put it this way again, just so your audience gets it. If Russia had a similar policy to strategically defeat the United States, um, it would be looking for the total economic collapse of the United States. So all you Americans that are getting up in the morning and going to work, you won't get up in the morning and go to work because you won't have jobs, because the economy will have collapsed. It'll be the depression, worse. That's what we're trying to do to Russia. Um, and if Russia was trying to do it to us, you'd say, well, no, 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 that can't stand. You're not allowed to make our economy collapse. That's what we're trying to do to Russia. It would mean the end of the constitutional republic, because strategic defeat means the collapse of the political system of governments. We are trying to get Vladimir Putin, his presidency, to collapse, to get the institutions that have kept him in power for 25 years to collapse. We want to bring down the Russian government. If the Russian government said it is our policy to see the White House, Congress, everything, the constitutional government that you have today collapse, all gone, finished. We'd say, well, no, you can't do that. That's the end of America. Are you starting to get the picture? So it's not just about military defeat on the battlefield. Strategic defeat means economic, social, and political collapse. That is our policy as we sit here today against Russia. And the Russians are like, okay, we can handle it. You want to bring about economic collapse? Well, it ain't us collapsing. It's Germany, France, and Europe that's collapsing. It's America that has economic blowback. So you want to keep playing the economic collapse game? We'll do that. Societal collapse? Last time I checked, it wasn't Vladimir Putin getting on the TV in a shrill voice like Emmanuel Macron did yesterday to French, saying, I'm going to stay in and complete my term. I don't care that 60% of the French people don't want me here. I don't care this. I'm here. I'm staying. Putin's not doing that. Why? Because he just won an election where 77% of the eligible electorate voted, and 88% of them said, we want Vladimir Putin. And that's the way it stands. So Russia's solid politically. France is collapsing. Alternative for Deutschland, which is becoming the dominant political party in Germany, has just come out and said, if we win the election early next year, we're out of the European Union. That's the end of Europe. All over. Game, set, match, flush down the toilet of life. So this whole concept of strategic defeat isn't going well for the people they're putting it. But remember, when we talk about that, it's not an academic term. It means we want Russia to collapse. We want Russia to break up. We want the Russian Federation to cease to exist. And that's our official policy. Russia can handle all that. What Russia isn't going to handle is giving us the tools to make that happen militarily. And one of the first things Russia will say is, you're not allowed to attack us. You can't do it. That's an act of war. And you can't do it using weapon systems that could be part of a precursor conventional assault on Russia as a preemptive attack leading to a nuclear preemption designed to achieve the strategic defeat of Russia. You say, well, Scott, you smoking dope while you're down there in Washington, D.C.? Did you have some bad mushrooms? Where did this come from, the United States trying to use nuclear weapons? Well, it came straight out of the mouth of Rear Admiral Thomas Buchanan, the director of plans. That means the guy who does the war plans for Strategic Command, the war fighting unified command, combatant command. He gave a presentation about a week and a half ago at the International Institute of Strategic Studies here in Washington, D.C., where he started off, sane. He brought up the old Ronald Reagan era mantra: nuclear wars can't be won, therefore they should never be fought. Genius. And he said that. Then he turned around and he said, except the Biden administration's ready to have a nuclear exchange with Russia. That's war. And we're going to win. We're going to prevail. Wait, you just told me you can't fight a nuclear war because it can't be won. And now you're telling me you're ready to fight a nuclear war and you're going to win it. How are you going to win it? Well, this is the part that got the Russians' attention. When we prevail, we're going to retain enough strategic deterrence capability so that we can continue to deter other nuclear armed adversaries like China. Well, how do you do that when you have strategic parity brought on by the New START Treaty, the last remaining arms control treaty, which expires in February of 2026, that gives you roughly the same number of strategic nuclear weapons? how do you, if you're going to do an attack that you win, not expend the amount of ammunition that you're trying to destroy? There's only one way this can happen: nuclear preemption. That's it. So Buchanan just said, without saying it, that the war that the Biden administration is getting ready to fight with Russia and win is a nuclear war of preemption. We attack Russia first preemptively, which means that the ATACMS missile have now become part of the opening salvo of this preemption, and Russia can't allow it. And that's why Russia said, this will not stand. You must reverse this. And if you don't, we will have to nuclear preempt you. Now, there's some interesting things that have been happening. Russia fired the Oreshnik missile, which is their intermediate range missile. It's a strategic system. Strategic systems have never been fired in anger before, ever. Not by Russia, not by the United States, not by anybody. They just fired one in anger against Dnipropetrovsk, a Ukrainian city. Russia has now said that they're getting ready to fire more of these. Russia is going to deploy the Oreshnik missile into Ukraine in 2025. That means now this nuclear capable system is going to be forward deployed, not Ukraine, Belarus, into Belarus. And now from that Belarus perch, there ain't a square inch of territory in Europe that isn't covered within 7 to 10 minutes of this weapon system being fired. All of Europe is covered by it. Russia will more than likely deploy the Oreshnik system into the Chukota area of Russian Siberia, which means Alaska and most of the continental United States will be covered by a strategic system that has now been fired in anger. It's no longer theoretical. It's no longer one of these psychological barriers. Well, they'll never launch because that would be the end of the world. They already fired it. They're getting ready to fire more. It's becoming part and parcel of the bag of, the tools of the trade that people use now. This is a very, very dangerous situation, a grotesque escalation. And here's the frustrating part for me personally. I was a weapons inspector for the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. This will be, of course, the subject of the book event that I'm doing on Sunday night at Busboys and Poets, to talk about my book, Disarmament in Time of Perestroika, but more importantly, to talk about the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, which has now become very relevant because the threats we fought to avoid and get rid of back in late 1980s, early 1990s have manifested themselves. This Oreshnik missile system is an intermediate range missile that would not exist today if it weren't for Donald Trump pulling out of the INF treaty in 2019. This is the importance of arms control. I've been saying it till I'm blue in the face. And people are like, nah, Scott, it's not that important. It's, don't worry about it. It's not. Guys, we're all going to die because we don't have arms control. We may avoid a limited, this window right now by stopping the ATACMS missiles. But the Oreshnik is a game changer. And if we don't start a process that says we have to get that game piece off the map. And I know the Russians are going to get pissed at me when I say, but I don't care. I'm an American. I'm not a Russian. I'm not pro-Russian. I'm not anti-Russian, but I'm not pro-Russian. I'm pro-America, and the Oreshnik system is incompatible with our ability to function as a modern nation state. It must be eliminated. And we're only going to do that with arms control. And we can only achieve arms control if we sit down across the table from the Russians as equals and engage in good faith negotiations, which we historically haven't done. The INF Treaty was the last good faith negotiation we had. And the Russians look back on and say, well, that's a bad deal for us because we got rid of all our weapons. And then you went ahead and collapsed the Soviet Union, strategic defeat, and then went on to use strategic arms reductions to make sure that you had a strategic advantage over Russia. New START treaty, 100% bad faith negotiation on the part of the United States. But we have to do this in order to prevent a nuclear war. So that's that's what I'm trying to do. We're going to have a panel on. I did my meetings with Congress yesterday. Panel discussion tomorrow. 3-part. First part is the danger of nuclear war, basically to educate everybody about the fact that this is real as it gets. And if we don't stop using ATACMS, we're all going to die. Then I'm going to say, but remember, don't identify the problem unless you have the solution. The solution is twofold. One, to work with Congress to make this issue known and to show that it's being acted on. There's nothing going to happen in Congress between now and January 20th. That's the reality. Even if the House got their act together, the Senate won't. There's this version of Congress right now is over in 2 weeks. The new version of Congress comes in on January 3rd, and they're going to be loath to do anything that preempts any policy options coming out of the future Trump administration, which is sworn in on January 20th. So we're not going to get change out of Congress. What we're going to get from Congress is the ability to articulate the problem and the solution. And yesterday showed me that Congress, Democrats and Republicans alike, agree that the problem is the imminent threat of nuclear war, and the solution, at least for this phase of it, is to stop giving Ukraine permission to use the ATACMS. Walking the halls of Congress yesterday, I brought in a draft letter that I thought I was going to have to speak until I'm blue in the face to get people to agree to sponsor the letter, put signatures on it. Came out holding in my hands a bill that has already been passed, not passed, but already been put together and sponsored and put up for discussion, that says just this: it stops so the solution's right there. And that's what I told every member of Congress. I said, are you going to support this? Well, I said, you do know that this right here saves America and saves the world from nuclear war. This right here, this little bill saves America and saves the world. Well, there's 1,000 pages of congressional rules of procedure that I'm like, guys, this little piece of paper, 2 pages, saves the world. Literally, these 2 pages save the world. Procedurally, Congress isn't going to take any action, but they all agree that what's written on those 2 pages saves the world. And that's the good news, because now we could take that. And the second panel that we're going to have is third panel is about how to approach Trump. And I can't get into too much because, man, this is politics, and you never want to get ahead of anybody politically. But I will say this: that this problem has been identified. The need to get it to the Trump camp has been identified, and people are looking for the ways to do just that. And if that can happen and Trump takes action before January 20th, man, we're going to celebrate Christmas. We're going to have a New Year's. It's going to be wonderful. Doesn't mean that all our problems have been solved, but we'll be alive to solve the problems. This is what I've been trying to tell people: is I don't give a damn about any of your problems. They don't matter because you're going to be dead. After yesterday, for the first time, I have some optimism, because I actually could see a path. And it's a path. I did a ridiculous meme in the lead up to the election on November 5th, using the Avengers as the storyboard. And bottom line is a 1 in 14 million chance to save America, and that's what voting for Donald Trump was, a 1 in 14 million. Well, after yesterday, guys, we're down to about a 1 in 5 chance to save America and save the world from the threat of nuclear war. We went from 1 to 14 million to 1 in 5. That's pretty damn good. That's pretty damn good. And now what we're going to do after tomorrow's event is we're going to keep putting the pressure on Congress, keep trying to reach out to the Trump administration until we get the result we want or we die. But this is where we're at. This is a campaign. We're making progress. Like I said, notice these eyes today. They're not as bad as they've been all week, because I've been getting no sleep. I can't sleep at night. My wife keeps saying, what's the matter? What's the matter? I don't want to tell her that, I'm crying in my sleep because there's no chance to live. Well, no, it's okay. I just have a heartburn. But I don't sleep at night. All I do is think. I got to shut this brain off. And it doesn't shut off because it always leads to nuclear war, nuclear war, nuclear war. I slept like a baby last night after walking through Congress. I came here and I collapsed and I fell asleep, and I had a good night's sleep, the first good night's sleep I've had in a long time. It doesn't mean that we've solved this. It doesn't mean it's over. But for the first time, I see a path forward that says we're going to live. And that makes me happy.
Scott, today is December 6th, and the new president takes office on January 20th. So between December 6th and January 20th, the Biden administration is still the go-to administration, I believe. But you're saying Trump. How could you get around talking to the Biden administration and talking to Trump when Biden is still the president?
Well, one of the first Perceptions create their own reality. That's an old saying. It's as true as the day is long. Um, the Russians have perceptions that are derived from the actions of the U.S. government. Right now, their perceptions are because the United States has articulated a strategic plan of the strategic defeat of Russia, and they're now acting on that by empowering Ukraine to use ATACMS missiles to strike Russian territory. The Russian perception is that the Biden administration is moving in a direction that leads to a nuclear preemptive strike. Um, what we need to do is change that Russian perception to give the Russians hope that on January 20th, there will be a new president who isn't going to continue that policy. Therefore, it's in the interest of Russia not to allow itself to be sucked down into the vortex of national decision making that creates its own momentum, its own imperative that makes nuclear war all but impossible to stop. Right now, we are on a trajectory that if the Russians, in responding to these actions, have started a process of escalation. The Oreshnik missile was a major escalation. I don't think Americans get it. This isn't such a cool thing to sit there and go, oh, a new missile. Let's bring in Theodore Postal to talk about this missile and its capabilities. Ain't this cool, geeky stuff? Da, 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 da. No, this is an escalation that's going to kill us all, unless it's stopped. And the key aspect of stopping this escalation is perception. What do the Russians perceive the threat to be from the United States of America? If they focus singularly on the Biden administration, then we're in a world of hurt. But if Russia can look at a Congress that is saying, hey, Biden, I mean, every single member in their staff said Biden didn't come to them at all about this decision to use ATACMS. Didn't consult Congress at all. It just happened. They woke up and we were at war with Russia. And they're like, what the hell just happened here? Even the staunchest supporters of the Ukraine conflict went, what just happened? How did we go from we don't want World War III, we don't want to go to war, to Joe Biden literally declaring war against Russia without coming through Congress? How did this happen? And if the Russians can be educated on that reality, that this is simply the unilateral actions of a desperate man, who is taking instructions from a crazy Secretary of State in a futile effort to disrupt the potential of a future Trump administration from, solving this Gordian knot that they're trying to, of policy that they're trying to tie. If the Russians can be convinced that there isn't going to be continuity, that this isn't going to extend into Trump, then their perception is we don't have to take escalatory measures now, that we can pull these back and we can hold them and stay until Trump comes in. But they still have to be worried about that intermittent time, and you shouldn't have them guessing. And so what Trump needs to do is make sure that there's no guesswork here, that he says without a shout, and just one thing. He says, no, we're not going to use ATACMS missiles against Ukraine, against Russia. We're not going to give Ukraine permission to do that. That's over. That's it. That doesn't mean that Keith Kellogg doesn't get to come out and say, we're going to freeze the front line and we're going to bring in NATO troops and we're going to do this and do all the things the Russians object to. None of that's going to create a nuclear war, because Russia will just say, no, you're not. No, you're not going to do it. Easy solution. But the ATACMS missile isn't theoretical. It's not an academic exercise. It's happening. It has killed Russians. It has destroyed Russian equipment. It was happening to us in the United States out of Mexico. We'd have invaded Mexico by now. Guaranteed. Guaranteed we would have invaded Mexico. Mexico wouldn't exist as a modern nation state if Mexico allowed Russia and China to facilitate the attack of American military installations, cities, and towns from Mexican territory. 100%. And there wouldn't be an American to be against it. Democrats, Republicans alike would rally and say, march, take Mexico City, eliminate the Mexican government because they pose an existential threat to the United States of America. Well, guess what? The Ukrainian government poses an existential threat to the existence of Russia because the United States has facilitated their ability to attack Russia using American weapons at the direction of the United States. A state of war exists between the United States and Russia. Congress is saying we're not part of that. And so we need to educate the Russians on the fact that constitutionally, the United States Congress is the one that gets to declare war. The president doesn't get to do it unilaterally, although apparently he's doing it because Congress says there's not enough time to do a war powers resolution. And well, it's your job. I don't want to hear there's not time. Do your damn job. But they're not. And there's not going to be any um, effort by a Republican led Congress to muddy the waters before Trump comes in. So Trump has to cut through all of this complexity and come out and say, yeah, we're not doing that. That's not going to happen. We're not going to let attackums happen. If he does that, I personally believe that the Russians will say, okay, we got it. Because the Russians are pragmatic. They don't want war. They don't want a nuclear war. And people say, well, Scott, what led you to believe the Russians behave that? Look at what they did from 2021 up until February 2024 when they actually moved in militarily in Ukraine. They bent over backwards to get Minsk adopted, to get action. When they met with Biden in Geneva in June of 2021, Putin said, you got to make Minsk happen. You got to have this thing happen. And Biden said, I promise you, Tony Blinken's going to get on it. He lied. Blinken didn't get on it. And Russia pulled the plug. But even when they pulled the plug, they created two draft treaties that they put on the table on December 17, 2021, one to NATO, one to the United States, and said, this will solve it, new European security framework. But we need it in writing because we don't trust you anymore. You gave us a verbal assurance in June that you were going to do something, and you didn't do it. So here is, we need something in writing, but you need to take this seriously. We didn't. Even then, when they first went into Ukraine, it wasn't an invasion to decapitate and destroy Ukraine. It was to put pressure on Ukraine to get them to the negotiating table so that they could negotiate a peaceful outcome. And it worked. 6 days after the special military operation began, Ukraine was at the negotiating table. And by the end of March, they had a completed peace plan that would have ended the war on favorable terms to Ukraine, by the way. And we walked away from that. Russia has bent over backwards to avoid this. So when people say, well, how could you be sure? I'd say because past precedent shows that the Russians have no interest in pushing this up to a state of open war between the United States, even though one exists. They don't want a nuclear war. And if you give them a window of opportunity to get off that fast track towards war, Russia will take it. Vladimir Putin has indicated that. Lavrov has indicated that. So I'm confident. Like I said, I slept well last night because I'm running it and going, yeah, this makes sense. Now, it doesn't mean that Trump is going to do anything. That's not a guarantee. That's why we have to keep fighting. And we can't allow Congress to stop putting pressure. We have to keep fighting and telling Congress, do your damn job, do your damn job. People, we're going to be handing you out phone numbers, names of Congress. You got to call. Paul Tonko's our guy, right?
Yep.
Okay, everybody watching this thing, as soon as it's done, pick up the phone and call Paul Tonko and say, no damn ATACMS missiles using. What's your stance on this, Paul? Have you signed on to the resolution? What are you doing, Paul? He can't, five of us call, his staffer's going to blow it off. If his phone rings 24/7, Paul Tonko will have to address this. Make his phone ring, not because you're helping Trump or helping the Republicans, because you want to live, because you want to celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever the hell you celebrate. Because you want to celebrate a new year. You want to bring it in. You want to have a next birthday. You want to celebrate a wedding anniversary. If you have a pregnant member in your family, you want to see that birth. You want to bring that child into life and raise them and have a future. You want all those things, none of which are going to happen if we die. Call Paul Tonko. Make his damn phone go off the hook. Call Chuck Schumer. Don't give him any rest. Make sure Chuck Schumer does nothing but answer the phone and say, what do you mean to tell? They're going to have, it's in their mind. It's in their head. You own them. This is what democracy is about. Make it work. It doesn't work if you don't play your part. Democracy isn't about voting people and putting them in an office. That's step one. Democracy is about we, the people, holding those elected representatives accountable for what they do in our name. And right now, I just told you, we have the easiest solution in the world to stay alive. Stop attacking Russia with ATACMS missiles. When this podcast ends, get off your ass, get to the phone, call Paul Tonko's office. On Monday, pick the phone up, call him again. Tuesday, call him again. Wednesday, call him again. Thursday, call him again. Never stop calling. Do the same to Chuck Schumer. If you're in a district that has a different representative, do the same damn thing. Make sure that they wake up every morning, know that they're going to get a phone call that says, stop sending ATACMS missiles into Russia. Stop it, stop it, stop it. And They're going to have to say something. They're going to have to talk about this bill. They're going to have to maybe put out a letter. They're going to have to make a statement to Biden. They're going to have to do something that says that Congress cannot allow the United States to be engaged in a shooting war with Russia with Congress not being consulted. And in doing that, you empower Trump to take action because now Trump won't be asked to do something in a political vacuum. He will now be stepping in actually to save the frickin' day. That's what Donald Trump wants to do. He wants to be the cavalry. He is John Wayne. He wants to be on that horse. He wants to come riding down. He wants people to treat him as the white knight rescuing them. Let's give him that opportunity. Let's create the potential for that to happen. Because even if you hate Donald Trump, I hope you like life. Let's let him, help him, help us, help me, help you. Cuba Gooding Jr., Jerry Maguire, help me, help you. Show me the money. This is what we need to do, guys. The money right now is you making a damn phone call to your representatives to demanding that the United States stop attacking Russia with ATACMS missiles. And then you get to live.
Okay, one quick thing. We live in upstate New York, Scott, and Tonko is our congressman. But there's people who hear this throughout the country. Know who your congressperson is, know who your senator is, and make that call.
Yeah, it's not hard. Google.
Right.
Let me work it through. This is the simpletons approach, and I say simpleton because I'm simple. This is how I would do it. I don't know who my congressional representative is, but I'm going to go to Google, type in my address, and say, what is my congressional district? And they're going to tell you, you're in the New York 6th Congressional District. And then I'm going to Google that and they say, your representative is Paul Tonko. And then I'm going to go down, there's going to be a phone number down there. Call your representative. You know what, ladies and gentlemen? First of all, he has to take your call. He has to take your call. That's his job. He can't not take your call. They have to take your call. And if they're not answering the phone, go to the office and pound on the door, pound on the desk and say, I'm here. I'm a constituent. They have to, by law, receive you if you're a constituent. And then sit down and talk to them. And then when they look behind you and they see a line of people coming in with the same issue, believe me, they're going to sit there and go, okay, we understand. You want to stop ATACMS. We've got it to the guy. Don't accept it. Come in and say, no, I'm here. I want you to stop the ATACMS thing. And he's going to call Tonko and say, boss, our office is paralyzed. We can't move because of this ATACMS issue. And Tonko's going to go, I need a briefing. And maybe if the people said, well, Scott Ritter is in your district and why don't you invite Scott Ritter in to educate you? And then I get the phone call from Paul Tonko and people go, well, that's just, Scott, that's fantasy. Well, how did I get to meet Chuck Hagel? He's a pretty powerful guy. He was big time senator, Armed Services Committee and all that, went on to be Secretary of Defense. You know how I got to meet Chuck Hagel in the lead up to the Iran-Iraq War? Because 5,000 of his constituents called him nonstop for 24 hours saying, if you don't meet with Scott Ritter, you don't get our vote. And when I got home, because I went to Omaha, Nebraska and I did a speaking event. When I got home, my phone was ringing off the hook. Chuck Hagel in person. Said, Scott, when can you come down to Washington? I got to meet you. I got to talk to you, or else I'm never going to have a peaceful night's rest. It works, ladies and gentlemen. It works. Be active in this thing called democracy. Don't be passive. Be active. And this is the issue that will save your life, save the life of everybody you love. Paul Tonko, I'm sorry, man. I don't mean to ruin your Christmas, but screw you. Screw you. I want you to get no sleep. I want you to be harassed 24/7 on this issue because you need to speak out. It's not my business. I'm not on the appropriate committee. It's about saving the lives of all your constituents. Nuclear war kills them all. And you, by the way, Paul, you're not immune. Make his life miserable, make him take action, make him put out a statement on his website. I am Paul Tonko, and I am opposed to the continued provision of ATACMS missiles by the United States to Ukraine for the purpose of attacking Russia. And now the Russians look at that and go, okay, there's some action taking place in Congress. We can back off a little bit. Trump looks at that and go, man, even the Democrats are against this. Maybe I should say something. And then we could go play costume. I can go dress him up as John Wayne and We can get him a nice horse and he can ride out and jump off the horse and say, I've decided that we are not going to use ATACMS missiles. And everybody goes, oh, Donald Trump saved our lives. Good. I don't care because we're alive. But
Right.
something has to happen. Yeah.
So will your events be on the internet this weekend?
That will be on the internet.
Okay.
I mean, Cynthia, you and I speak like the old people we are. Because normally you would say, "Are you going to be streaming you're going to be streaming the event online using da da?" No, it's on the internet. Yeah,
Okay.
it's going to be on the internet. It's going to be streamed live. We're going to be streaming it on a number of channels. If you go to scottritter.com, you'll be able to see all the different channels. For instance, the Gray Zone, we're going to be streaming it on the Gray Zone's YouTube channel, Danny Haifong's channel, Judge Napolitano's channel, um, and some others as well. And we're going to be putting it out on X, on Rumble, etc. All you have to do is go to scottritter.com and you'll be able to link into whatever channel it is you want to watch it on.
Okay. Diane, you have events this weekend also, right?
Yeah, and I think from what Helga planned, you will begin to understand why Lyndon LaRouche was perceived as the #1 threat to the establishment, because if we can survive in the short term, which Scott has given us some direction as hopefully that we can, the question is, how do you not find yourself repeatedly in a situation where you're about to have World War III again? And as Elliot Roosevelt reported from the meetings with his father, FDR, in World War II, FDR was obsessed with ending colonialism. He said, if we don't allow nations to have their own sovereignty and develop, we are going to have World War III, even if we avoid it now. And sure enough, the British, others made sure the war dragged on so that FDR would be dead by the end of it, and the various arrangements he'd worked out with Russia, with China, etc., died with him. And I think that's why Elliot Roosevelt wrote his book. So what was very clear to Helga is that we are in a period of transition. Scott just referenced what happened with the government of France. Look what just happened in South Korea. The president tries to declare martial law because the population is getting sick of being a colony of the United States, doesn't want to participate in our military adventures. And so based on, I don't know, some kind of whim or some guy in the military saying, oh, North Korea, whatever, he declares a state of martial law, and members of the parliament sneak past the barricades, vote unanimously, the 190 who could get through, to end it. That, I think, is fascinating. So what we are seeking to do is to inform this revolutionary spirit with the policies of the new paradigm, also with the urgency that if we don't change the way we think and act, that we are going to annihilate ourselves. So I'm just going to go to what the Schiller Institute conference is happening Saturday morning, and you can sit down and watch everything all day. The theme is All Men Become Brethren. And on Saturday morning, you have Helga Zepp-LaRouche and actually Naledi Pandor, the former foreign minister of South Africa, who brought the case against Israel for committing genocide against the Palestinian population. She is now speaking on Sunday, has Sunday morning, but she will be speaking, extremely courageous woman. Dmitry Trenin, who's from he's the academic supervisor of the Institute of World Military Economy and Strategy in Moscow, the former president of Guyana, the former prime minister of Slovakia, Ambassador Chas Freeman, who people probably, I hope, know, not just former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Security Affairs, but was the translator for Nixon when he opened up China, and a good friend of Scott's from the Eisenhower Media Institute, Colonel Larry Wilkerson. So that's just the first panel, which is on the strategic crisis. The second is on the question of the economic development policies and economic policy required to develop the world, and features the ambassador of Palestine to Denmark, a leading top Chinese economist, and also several other international speakers and farmers, someone from the Department of Diplomacy at McGimo, this is a Moscow professor. And then on Sunday morning, this is on advanced science and technology. Again, Jacques Cheminade from France, the leader of a political party in France, is speaking. Ted Postel is there. Sergei Pulinets, who is a brilliant Russian scientist who has developed a technique of forecasting earthquakes, who says nobody should die from an earthquake. There are precursors, and that work has been largely silenced. And then Sunday afternoon, I am keynoting the panel on culture, followed by Helga Zepp-LaRouche and several others. Because I think, look, the debt of the United States, of our federal debt, private personal debt, and business debt, is now $100 trillion. It's more than it's ever been in history. We're not on a pathway that is sustainable. So either we're going to have lunatics like Lindsey Graham and people who say it's really good for the economy if we can get a bunch of Ukrainians and now Americans killed, so the military industrial corporations can make money and BlackRock makes money and the stock market stays up. That is not a survivable proposition, nor is massive austerity, which is what the people rejected in France, where you eliminate Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, affordable housing, charge people $7,000 to park their car in Manhattan, whatever the way that they're looting people is, and everyone feels like they're being looted right now, unless they're in the top 10th of 1%, this will not work. It'll either lead to a dark age or it will lead to nuclear war. And therefore, we have to actually change the way we think. We have to survive in the short term, so then we can fight out what the policies will be. How do you get a new paradigm? This has already begun with the BRICS process. They just had an incredible conference in Kazan. Russia, China, India, they have now 13 new BRICS partners, BRICS potentials. Turkey tried to join. I'm not sure they're going to be so welcome after their latest activities in Syria, etc. But this bloc represents more than half of the world's population, and then half of the world's production of things like steel, wheat, etc. So when you hear the unfortunate, and I hope in President-elect Donald Trump takes this course of being heroic, because when he says silly things like, if you go out of the dollar, we're going to slap 100% tariffs on you. Well, people will say, okay, thanks. We don't need to trade with you. There's something much bigger going on. Why should we try and be in a partnership with you so you can poke our eyes out and starve us to death and blow up our country? This is what I think Americans have to realize. So the idea, I think, as a totality is the paradigm. Americans can become much better. It's the 250th anniversary of the founding of our republic. We beat the British Empire. We were the first people to do it. What is that legacy? That legacy is not making low-level deals. It's a legacy of vision. So many nations in Africa, in fact, the original conference in Bandung in 1955 said the American Revolution, defeating the British Empire, is the model for what we want to do. So the combination, I think, is stop the insane policy. Absolutely, everyone should be on a first-name basis with every single staff member of your congressman, or like myself and Jose, they will tremble if they find out that you're in a room because you've disrupted their meeting so many times. They have to know you and what you think, which they're not being told in the media. And then secondly, demand that our nation actually fulfill what it was intended to do. And that requires some thought and some reflection. The culture in our nation has been horribly dumbed down. People have horribly low-level ideas of politics, and we have to change it. When the Berlin Wall came down, there was a revival of Schiller and Beethoven, and the theme of that revolution became Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. So what would the theme of the American Revolution be? Maybe it wouldn't be a musical theme. Maybe it would be our Declaration of Independence or a Constitution. But the most noble ideas, we have to make them our own, and we have to find therein the ability and power to act in that way. And when you act from that standpoint, you discover that you're not as fearful as you might have been earlier. So the Schiller Conference is entirely online. It's from 9 a.m. till 4 p.m., both Saturday and Sunday. And the event at the Press Club begins at 4 p.m. till 7, followed by another event at 7 to 9 or 10, I think. And then the book signing on Sunday is that at 7, Scott?
Yeah, it's from 7 to 10, and it's more than a book signing. It's actually going to be the first significant conversation in public about the importance of arms control and the role that the INF Treaty played in creating arms control and the necessity for a new INF Treaty. So it's not just a one-off event to have people come in and buy books and sign them. It's the beginning of a dialogue that I hope will be able to expand into the next year on reviving arms control under the Trump administration.
I want to say something about that because I only learned this recently and it was so fascinating. I was at a conference on the development of nuclear energy with a whole lot of young people, young engineers who were very optimistic because now it's dawning on people that we can and should have been recycling the waste the whole time. But I didn't realize we were not mining for uranium for the last couple of decades because of the INF Treaty, that the elimination of a lot of these weapons was supplying our nuclear power plants. And I had no idea. I mean, talk about swords into plowshares.
Well, there were two things. One, the United States converted our nuclear pits, plutonium pits, and things around these weapons. You know, we didn't destroy them. We put them into reserve, and then we can use them in other weapons. But with the Soviets, what we were doing is buying their weapons grade plutonium, and then we would mix it into other materials to create nuclear fuel rods that would be, it's called MOX, I think it is, and they would use this to power nuclear power plants. And because there was so much of it, it basically eliminated our need. And so the other thing happens when we stopped mining uranium here, we started buying it from the Russians. And you know, right now we are sitting here with these full-scale I think just this past month, I think Russia has sanctioned the United States by turning off the supply of uranium to the U.S., which puts us in a quandary because we don't have a domestic source of uranium. We're going to have to go out and find it in a global market that's already in trouble because of the French getting kicked out of Niger and the loss of uranium mines in the Sahel. So yeah, no, INF Treaty had a lot of repercussions.
So, Diane?
Well, I think that it's just one example of the benefit of cooperation for the good of mankind as a whole. And who knows what we could be producing if we were getting rid of some of the weapons we had today. I don't know if there's a use for horrible chemical or biological weapons like what I think we were testing or developing in Ukraine. Some things probably should just be destroyed. But you know, science is not in and of itself good or bad. And General Douglas MacArthur made this point on the battleship Missouri when he received the surrender of the Japanese. he said at that time he thought our scientific ability had outpaced our morality in a sense. He said mankind has developed the ability to annihilate itself. And if we don't figure out some means other than war for resolving our problems, then we're done. And mankind has to develop. We have to become a better species. And I think that's really the challenge in front of us now. I also am optimistic because the world is changing, and I think it can't help but erupt inside the United States. But I think there are some of these old dinosaurs who really want their old colonial oligarchical way, and they seem to be prepared to jeopardize every living thing on Earth to cling to some delusion. And that's why it's so important to be vocal and active. Be active and nourish your soul with beautiful ideas so you have the strength to fight another day. So that's my thinking of the events this weekend.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Scott. And everything that both of you are doing will be streamed. will be streamed. So we'll see you on the internet this weekend. You've been listening to Scott. You're laughing. Well, right? Well, you're going to be streamed, right?
We're going to be on the internet, Cynthia.
Oh, come on. Okay, so you've been listening to Scott Ritter, Diane Sare, that they did a really good talk about their efforts for this weekend. This is Issues That Matter, and if you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Diane. Best of luck this weekend. Have a good weekend. Thank you, everybody, for listening.